In 1945, Japan's military leaders came face to face with a truth they could no longer ignore. America wasn't stopping. There were no peace talks, no compromises. Only more soldiers, more ships, more bombs. For Japan's War Council, that moment was like staring into the abyss. Three choices lay ahead, three possible paths, and one of them would nearly destroy both nations. They finally understood something chilling. The Americans would never stop fighting. That night, the generals gathered behind closed doors. It was a secret meeting that would reshape their entire strategy. But surrender was not on the table. Instead, they chose to fight even harder. And that choice led to one of the most shocking turns in human history. Japan was collapsing. City after city was being destroyed. The skies thundered with American bombers. The seas swarmed with American ships. The generals sat in dimly lit rooms, staring at maps covered in red ink. Each mark a loss, each circle a defeat. The truth was undeniable. America had more of everything. More men, more machines, more factories, more oil. Every time Japan managed to destroy part of the American force, new waves arrived. It was like fighting the ocean itself. Endless, unstoppable, merciless. The High Command began to realize the terrifying truth. This was not an ordinary enemy. The Americans fought differently. They didn't just fight to win. They fought because they believed. They carried an unshakable conviction that what they were doing was right. That belief made them unstoppable. It was something Japan's generals had never encountered before. General Hideki Tojo called an emergency council. No outsiders, no journalists, just Japan's most powerful men in one silent room. Nobody spoke at first. To admit the truth meant admitting failure. Finally, one general stood up and broke the silence. "America will not surrender," he said quietly. The room went cold. Everyone knew he was right. Reports confirmed that American troops fought to the death, refusing capture. They threw themselves into battle even when it meant certain death. They were not like any enemy Japan had ever faced. Japanese intelligence had intercepted American radio messages. Soldiers talked about home, about families, but always ended the same way. "We have to win this war first." That single phrase told Japan everything. They weren't fighting men. They were fighting an entire nation's will. How could you defeat an opponent who refused to stop? How do you conquer a people who would rather die than surrender? The generals looked at the statistics again, hoping the numbers were wrong. America had 10 times the manpower, 50 times the ships, 100 times the aircraft. Japan was running out of food, steel, and fuel while American factories never slept. Workers produced weapons day and night, even through holidays. Japan realized that America's greatest weapon wasn't its army or its machines, it was belief. The conviction that freedom and victory were worth any price. And belief they knew was stronger than bombs. So Japan's leaders faced a choice. Some generals pleaded for negotiation, for peace before total destruction. But others refused. They remembered what surrender meant: humiliation, occupation, loss of pride. To them, surrender was worse than death, so they made a decision that would cost countless lives. Even knowing they could not win, Japan would keep fighting. Better to fall with honor than live with shame. To them, this wasn't madness, it was duty. It was what soldiers were meant to do. But that decision would have terrible consequences. More battles, more blood. Japan's next move was desperate: the kamikaze. Young men, barely adults, volunteered to fly their planes straight into enemy ships. They called it the divine wind. For them, it was the ultimate sacrifice for their homeland. They wrote letters home, bowed before takeoff, and vanished into the sky. Some struck their targets, many did not, but all of them died. American sailors watched in horror as these planes dove straight toward them. They saw young men willingly choose death. It terrified them, and it enraged them. The result was the opposite of what Japan hoped for. Instead of breaking American resolve, it hardened it. The Americans became fiercer, more relentless than ever before. The plan had backfired completely. By the summer of 1945, Japan's leaders knew the truth deep down. The war was already lost. The Americans were preparing to invade the home islands. If that happened, millions of people, soldiers and civilians alike, would die. Japan's generals calculated the numbers and saw only destruction ahead. They thought of their children, their cities, their history, and they knew the end was near, but still, they couldn't bring themselves to surrender. Pride and honor chained them tighter than fear ever could. Then, something unimaginable happened. On August 6, 1945, a single American plane flew over Hiroshima. Moments later, the sky exploded with light. An entire city vanished in seconds. 70,000 lives, gone in a flash. The generals refused to believe it at first. One bomb, one plane, one city destroyed? It couldn't be real, but it was. Their scientists confirmed it. America had created a weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. An atomic bomb, powerful enough to erase everything. For the first time, the generals felt true fear. They finally understood that they weren't just losing, they were finished. There was no way to fight such power, no defense, no hiding, no victory left to chase. 3 days later, it happened again. Nagasaki was destroyed. Another 70,000 lives lost. Now there was no room for denial. Japan could not win. It could not negotiate. It could not survive if this continued. Emperor Hirohito made the final decision. He spoke the words no one else could. We must surrender. The generals wept. Hardened men who had given their lives to war broke down in tears. They knew what it meant, the loss of empire, the end of an era, the shattering of their nation's pride. But it also meant an end to death, an end to fire, an end to war. On August 15th, 1945, Japan announced its surrender. The guns went silent. The bombs stopped falling. And after years of unimaginable loss, the healing began. That moment didn't just end a war, it changed the course of history. It reshaped nations, and it reminded humanity of a painful truth. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is knowing when to stop fighting.